Oops, sorry. G'day, friends and fans. Welcome to Writing Corner, Faction Building Part 5, History and Law. I do apologize. I had a little personal emergency, and I'm sorry that I am starting late. I noticed some of you who were waiting have left, and hopefully you come back and realize that yes, I was, but I appreciate you. And again, I apologize for not being here on time. I know a lot of channels do this and get away with it, but I don't think I'm big enough, funny enough, or powerful enough yet for you to put up with shenanigans. So I did not deliberately keep you waiting. So hopefully you'll just forgive me, come back and continue to subscribe, continue to watch my videos, because this is my writing journey. I appreciate each and every one of you. I like to share as I grow, and hopefully some of you with the discussions can help me to improve. Now, when you're building a faction, you need to give it a bit of backstory, a bit of history, such as the origins. How did it come together? What keeps it, and of course, what keeps it going? Significant events. What challenges did the group founders incur? And what challenges has the organization encountered since? What does the story have to tell? I mean, when you build your organization, you are focused on the story. How does it fit into the story? I mean, and where is the factions? Is it at its youth, at its peak, at its downfall? And how does it fit in with the history? Now, remember, everything's about your story. So you're building this for you, for your story to fit in with your story. And of course, it has to all fit in with the conflicts and rivalries. How did they come about? The structure. Where's the structure originate from? How did the group devise its goals and motivations? Which ultimately, how did the faction get its name? And of course, going forward, it'll tie in with reputation, symbols and colors, mottos, personality and culture of its membership, recruitment, the policies and structure are actual laws, doctrine. They define, everything comes together. And sometimes these are minor statements, by the way. You're not writing the entire history of the Ku Klux Klan, for instance. And, well, if you are, you're not going to be going beyond the Ku Klux Klan, other than maybe the FBI. But again, you don't really need to give the FBI a backstory if you're writing a history of the Ku Klux Klan, unless, as I said, most of the details you're writing down are all to relate to your story. Of course, any ideas you have along the way, I do suggest you write them down, but do try to focus on how it fits with your story. But these could be simple statements, like Oliver Twist, Fagin. We don't know much about him. It's implied that he's Jewish, I think, not stipulated. And I believe there's no real backstory other than he grew up on the streets And as the boys came to him and he acquired more and more wealth, but there's obviously a connection to the merchants who sell the handkerchiefs. Fagin steals the handkerchiefs, cleans the silk handkerchiefs, the dye, they stripped of their dye, and they go as blank pieces of silk to be re-dyed. Why? Because there's a shortage, and the more silk you can buy cheap locally increases the profits of the merchants. And so the lore, the history, the backstory, this doesn't have to be much. And how is it? Where is it at in its history? Well, it's in decline as silk gets cheaper and cheaper and more plentiful, and more boys are finding themselves in stable employment or in stable homes. The poverty decreasing, and you actually see Victorian England, despite the massive wealth of the British Empire, the vast majority of the British were in poverty, and the vast majority of the British Empire was in poverty. And ironically, it couldn't build its empire without poverty, because you look the cost of the English budget, military budget you imagine today what the British Empire would have to generate more than the United States in revenue in order to maintain the armies, navies that it had. It had no air force. And the Marines were just part of the Navy. It didn't have its own command. It was just the Navy and the Army under the Lord Admiralty and the Duke of Wellington, wasn't it? But still, yeah, the Lord Commander was whoever was appointed, which usually was the Duke of Wellington. Although various lords over the years since had been appointed, that's true. But just think about it for a moment. Slavery was driving down cost of labor, that was decreasing, but the British Empire found that with the cost of labor going down, the profits of business were going down, and that slavery was an external trade, not an internal trade. There were many factors at play, and fighting slavery was huge. The social problems, the moral issues, people, and you could look if you're willing to look at the slave trade, like if you really want to, if you have within your story slavery, I suggest you read about the slavers of the Barbary Coast, the American interventions, the British anti-slavery movement, because those are real complex factions that rose up from the bottom, where they weren't top down like a military or a merchant guild or even a thieves guild. This was a real grassroots movement, and that gives you real material to work with, as opposed to, say, your standard RPG material. How many in your faction, who's its leader, what's its membership dues, couple of notable figures, and a couple of characters, and there you go. And then you have the failed Dungeons and Dragons movie. Why? Because it introduces an organization that very few know about outside of it's the hardcore players. It doesn't even follow the lore that the players know. Features an actor long out of the public consciousness, and it has too much diversity to fit in with the lore of the land and the peoples of the land. And then you have a bunch of nobodies facing the biggest and most powerful organizations and creatures and surviving, which people just go, that Displacer Beast should have just eaten them all and be done with it. And then, of course, it totally misrepresents magic and magic items. And so when you're establishing law and you're establishing factions and you're establishing its history, you're setting in stone rules that you have to abide by, because once your reader knows the rules, your reader is going to judge future material. Now, you can be ambiguous and you can be contradictory, because as long as the contradictions come from internal, like you have the internal truth, but the external observation, and the external observation are interpretations. Never treat the external as the fact. Treat the external as the observation, as the fiction. Always treat the internal dialogue and the internal actions as canon fact. You can have canon broken within, as long as the external opinion and not an external. Don't use external factions, or external characters to define the truth of your organization. Like the police in Oliver Twist will not depict Fagin in a kind light. No matter how well he treats the boys, he is always the abuser in their eyes and a thief. The merchants, despite the fact that they are buying those silk handkerchiefs off him, are not going to treat him as a fellow traveller. He is always the scumbag, the outsider. And even from the boys' point of view, they are going to defend her Fagin, or whatever it's supposed to be, from their rose-colored glasses, where they see him as the savior and big brother, not the abuser or user or exploiter as he really is. So the internal dialogue of Fagin is the truth. The external dialogue, even the boys in the guild, are not the truth. The police observation is even far removed from that, and the merchants, etc. That leaves you, the reader, to interpret who is right and wrong, and understand that it's morally and that, yes, the thief exploits the youth, but without the thief exploiting the youth, those young boys would have never grown up. They would have starved or died or been press ganged onto an English warship and most likely died or abused, and probably never had a chance to have a family, which the vast majority didn't, which is why the population of England is in terminal decline. It has been for some time. It's just, it would have been much sooner if not for so many returning home from the collapsing empire. So that's a lot of working material there in history for you to use for however you want to do it. And you could turn to other fiction, thieves guilds. Like Oliver Twist, I think, is the best. Although you could look to the history of the mafia, the Nostra Costa, what's the other one? Trying to think of it. I saw it recently. It was a very good mercenaries and private contractors. I think it was called Addicted to War, or Addicted to or Conflict Addiction, or something like that. It's written by an Australian soldier turned mercenary who was I think killed in Israel or Ukraine. I don't remember which, but 20 years he'd been fighting as a mercenary, and his memoir, he fought in Afghanistan originally, and fought in South Africa, and fought in other conflicts, he said, that you wouldn't even believe were going on, which is true. I detailed the other day wars and conflicts I really hadn't heard of either. So while I was looking at it, saying how out of touch the news really is, and how people don't really understand what's going on, and that helps with history and law. That why you have organizations and that are shadowy yet powerful. And one of the things I think in building factions, I don't think mentioned before, is the media and what role they play. So there's a lot of stuff for you to work with, and hopefully I've given you a lot of good ideas. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, subscribe, and all that stuff. And remember, I'm sponsored by you, the viewing audience. So please check out the links in the description below. 10% off the viewers, and buy 3 items, get 25% off. Limited time only. Ends Valentine's Day. So also consider becoming a patron. Links in the description below. But support my writing or RPG material, buy a book. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next video. Again, I apologize for being late.